Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling hybrid warfare. It's really a fundamental shift in how global power works now.
Right.
Forget the sort of traditional picture, armies massing at borders. This is much more subtle.
Yeah, deniable too, and it's happening all the time.
Persistent. Exactly. It's this new paradigm, kind of operating in that murky gray zone, somewhere between, well, real peace and actual open war.
Precisely. And look, for anyone listening, understanding this is really key, I think. Hybrid warfare is often that unseen force,
Yeah.
shaping so much of what we see in the news, maybe alleged election interference, simmering economic tensions, all that stuff.
Right.
So our mission today really is to unpack this complex area. We've got our sources, and we want to show you what makes it so relevant and frankly, pretty insightful into how the world works today.
Okay, let's try and unpack it then. What exactly are the core elements? What is hybrid warfare? Our sources point to a few key things.
Yeah, there's a whole toolkit.
Like psychological operations,
Yeah.
right? Aiming to influence what people believe, how they act.
Shaping perceptions.
Then you've got cyber attacks hitting infrastructure remotely, financial disruption too, trying to destabilize economies.
And proxies.
Yeah.
Using proxy militias. So
Yeah.
you can have conflict without actually sending your own troops in directly.
Media manipulation, that's a big one. Shaping the stories, public opinion.
Absolutely. And even using law, international law, as a kind of weapon, legal warfare or lawfare.
So the goal isn't always like immediate conquest.
Yeah.
Like taking over territory straight away.
That's a really crucial distinction, yeah. Often the aim is more about gradual weakening,
How so?
eroding an adversary's morale, maybe chipping away at their sovereignty, undermining the trust within their society. It's more like a strategy of attrition.
Ah, okay. Like wearing them down.
Exactly. Persistent pressure, eroding the opposition bit by bit.
And I mean, all the major global players are involved in this, aren't they?
Oh, absolutely.
So we're going to look at how the big ones, Russia, China, the United States, how they're using these tactics.
Right. We'll dig into the history a bit first.
Yeah, let's do that. Start with the historical context, then look at modern uses, maybe even touch on what's next, emerging techniques.
Sounds good. The aim is to give everyone a really clear, engaging picture of this critical aspect of, well, global power dynamics today.
Okay, so this term hybrid warfare, it feels very 21st century, very modern, but its roots, they go way back, don't they?
They really do. It's surprising, perhaps.
Yeah, this is where it gets fascinating looking at the sources. It's definitely not a totally new invention.
Not at all.
I mean, think way back. Sun Tzu, The Art of War, his whole emphasis on deception, making your opponent misjudge you. That's pretty much a cornerstone of hybrid strategies, isn't it?
Absolutely. And ancient empires, they were doing similar things, using spies, spreading misinformation, economic blockades, weakening rivals without always needing a huge battle.
So the tools were different, maybe less sophisticated, but the thinking was there.
The underlying logic, yeah.
Yeah.
And then the Cold War, that really institutionalized a lot of these methods. Well, our sources really highlight how the CIA and the KGB, they basically refined covert action into a strategic art form.
Right. Supporting coups.
Exactly. Disseminating propaganda, backing insurgencies all over the place, Latin America, Southeast Asia, Africa, Eastern Europe. These places became like theaters for this indirect power struggle.
Below the surface of the main East-West confrontation.
Precisely. And then after the Cold War ended, this idea of gray zone conflicts started getting more attention.
Explain that a bit more.
Well, it refers to actions that are aggressive enough to cause real harm, but they're carefully calculated, designed to stay just below the threshold that would trigger a full-on military response.
Ah, okay. Like pushing the boundaries without quite crossing the line into open war.
Exactly. Things like maybe color revolutions or economic sabotage, they really started blurring those traditional lines between just competition and actual conflict.
And then 9/11 shifted things again.
Yeah, that brought another evolution.
Yeah.
Because terrorist groups like Al-Qaeda and ISIS, they got really clever at adapting these hybrid methods.
Right, against much more powerful states.
Yeah. They became masters of using social media for propaganda, using encrypted comms to stay hidden, even recruiting online. Our sources note they were targeting minds, ideologies, long before any physical attacks.
And nation states obviously didn't stop. We saw Russia, Georgia in 2008. That felt like a big moment.
It was stark, yeah. That combination, cyber attacks hitting government systems, backing separatist movements, and conventional military force all at once.
And then Crimea, 2014, that felt almost like a blueprint for modern hybrid war.
Absolutely. The little green men, those unmarked soldiers.
Deniable.
Totally deniable initially. Plus, a huge push from state media to shape the narrative. And weaponizing social media bots, fake stories, fabricated videos, all deployed together.
And China, were they active early on too?
Our sources suggest they were definitely exploring how to use their growing economic power, their tech advancements, and their own narratives to push their interests, even back then, often without needing direct military action.
So putting it all together, it sounds like modern hybrid warfare isn't about inventing brand new tactics from scratch. It's more about, what? Amplifying the old ones.
Exactly that. Amplifying these older methods dramatically through modern technology. That's what's really expanding this gray zone where you don't see traditional battles.
So peace isn't just the absence of visible war anymore.
No, it's much more complicated. It's this space where major powers are constantly maneuvering, subtly shaping things in less obvious ways, often without firing a shot in the traditional sense unless they absolutely feel they have to.
Okay, let's zero in on Russia then. Our sources suggest their hybrid strategy is often about generating instability, chaos, almost by design. Can you unpack that?
Yeah, it's an interesting framing. The term you often hear is the Gerasimov doctrine. Now, people debate exactly what General Gerasimov meant.
Right, it's become a bit as a catch-all.
It has, but it's generally taken to mean this Russian approach that blends military, technological, cultural, informational, political tools, all orchestrated together.
But critically, below the threshold of conventional war.
That's the key. And the insight our sources point to isn't just the individual tools, it's their combined effect. The aim seems to be intentionally creating uncertainty, maybe paralyzing adversaries, sowing discord within their societies.
Induce chaos.
Yeah.
And we saw, as you said, an early version in Georgia 2008, cyber, separatists, then the military.
Yeah.
But Crimea 2014 really stands out.
Oh, absolutely. The Crimea annexation was a perfect showcase of this blend. You had the little green men, unmarked soldiers, seizing key infrastructure while Moscow officially denied involvement.
Plausible deniability.
Crucial. At the same time, Russian state media was hammering home a narrative to justify it, both at home and abroad. And social media was weaponized bots, trolls, fake videos, all creating confusion and boosting Russia's story.
And then there's the Donbas region,
Yeah.
eastern Ukraine.
Yeah.
Our sources describe it almost like a laboratory for these methods.
That's a really good way to put it. In Donbas, you saw political subversion, intense psychological ops targeting locals, a covert supply line keeping the militias going.
Right.
Russia deliberately blurred all the lines. War and peace, soldier and civilian, state and non-state actors. It let them keep that plausible deniability while still pulling the strings on the ground.
And making it hard for others, like NATO, to know exactly how to respond, what lines were actually crossed.
Exactly. It's like trying to grasp smoke, as you said earlier. You see the effects, but pinning down direct responsibility is tough by design.
And Russia hasn't just kept these tactics close to home, right? The sources talk about a non-kinetic hybrid war aimed at the West.
Precisely. The alleged interference in the 2016 U.S. election is maybe the most cited example.
Troll farms, hacked emails.
Yeah. But also supporting extremist groups in Europe, possibly trying to weaken the EU from within, even amplifying things like anti-vaccine narratives during the pandemic.
How does that fit in?
Well, it erodes trust in institutions, right? Fosters social division. That can be seen as a form of hybrid warfare, too. And then there are the cyber attacks on critical infrastructure, power grids, banks. That's more direct.
And this extends even further. Africa is mentioned with the Wagner Group.
Yes. Africa has become another important stage. The Wagner Group, technically a private military contractor, but with very close Kremlin ties.
Mm-hmm.
They've been active in places like Libya, Mali, Central African Republic. They offer security, Project Russian power, often in exchange for mineral rights or geopolitical influence. And usually this comes with disinformation campaigns painting Western influence negatively.
And even basic resources, like energy. That can be a weapon, too. Gas supplies to Ukraine, Germany, Poland.
Absolutely. Russia's been very skillful at leveraging energy. They can put pressure on countries by manipulating gas supplies, cut deals with allies, create leverage over adversaries, turning economic dependence into a tool of coercion.
So when you look at all these pieces, it feels like Russia's goal isn't just about grabbing land. It seems aimed at something bigger, maybe undermining the whole post-Cold War setup.
That really does seem to be the core of it, based on the analysis. For Russia, you could argue hybrid warfare is almost an existential strategy.
How so?
The aim appears to be undermining NATO, fracturing the EU, discrediting liberal democracies generally. It's not like a traditional war with clear start and end dates. It seems more like continuous multi-front pressure.
Across all domains.
Yeah. Online chat rooms, oil pipelines, ballot boxes, proxy battlefields. It's relentless pressure, a state of perpetual competition and disruption.
Okay, that paints a pretty clear picture of the Russian approach. Now let's switch gears to China. Our sources often describe their strategy as more like silent conquest. More subtle, longer term maybe. What does that look like?
Yeah, the contrast is quite interesting. Where Russia might seem more disruptive, China's strategy, often linked to ideas from unrestricted warfare, feels more gradual, more methodical.
Unrestricted warfare.
It's a concept suggesting leveraging all means, economic, technological, legal, informational, not just military, to achieve goals. The preference seems to be achieving dominance, maybe more Sino-centric world order, without needing kinetic force if possible. Silent conquest, as the sources say.
And the Belt and Road Initiative, the BRI, seems central to this. It's not just building roads and ports.
Oh, far from it. BRI is this massive global infrastructure program, right? Spanning Asia, Africa, Europe. But it's also a prime example of geopolitical weaponization of economics.
How?
By funding these huge projects, Beijing gets strategic influence, huge economic leverage, access to key transport routes, and choke points. And then there's the whole debt trap diplomacy concern.
Right, where countries get heavily indebted.
Exactly. Giving Beijing potentially massive leverage down the line, it's a powerful hybrid tool.
And this extends into tech with the digital Silk Road.
Precisely. That's the techno-industrial part of China's hybrid strategy. They're exporting surveillance systems, 5G tech, think Huawei facial recognition, data harvesting platforms globally.
And the word is?
Well, the concern highlighted in our sources is these technologies might have hidden vulnerabilities, backdoors, giving Beijing potential access to foreign data and communications. Plus, it subtly exports China's own model of digital governance, centralized control, censorship, data monopolies.
Okay. And what about straightforward cyber warfare? China's capabilities there?
They are significant, absolutely. China has shown it can and will engage in cyber espionage and attacks. We saw the massive OPM breach in the U.S. back in 2015.
Office of Personnel Management. Sensitive data on millions of government employees.
Exactly. Also, alleged attacks on Indian power grids. And intellectual property theft via cyber means is a huge component. It directly feeds into their civil-military fusion strategy. Meaning breakthroughs in the private tech sector are deliberately harnessed to boost military capabilities. Cyber theft accelerates that.
And beyond the tech, there's also this cognitive warfare idea, influencing thought.
Yes, and this is maybe one of the subtlest but potentially most powerful parts of the strategy, controlling narratives, shaping how people see things globally.
How do they do that?
Through platforms like TikTok, potentially shaping algorithms or content, establishing Confucius Institutes in foreign universities to promote Chinese culture and perspectives, using diplomatic pressure to silence criticism on sensitive topics like Xinjiang, Tibet, Hong Kong.
So it's not just about winning one argument, but shifting the whole environment.
Exactly. It's a long game, reshaping the global information space to make China's narrative seem normal, even accepted.
And looking at Taiwan specifically, it seems like a mix of these tactics are in play, short of actual invasion.
That's right. Towards Taiwan, you see disinformation campaigns trying to sow doubt and division. Economic coercion, too, targeting Taiwanese agriculture or tourism. And those PLA aircraft incursions into their air defense zone.
Are those just provocations?
Partly, but it's also about exhausting Taiwan's defenses, wearing down morale over time. It's persistent psychological pressure.
And finally, lawfare. Using law as a weapon. How does China do that?
They strategically interpret international laws and norms to fit their interests. The South China Sea is the classic example, with their expansive claims.
Right, building islands, ignoring international rulings.
Exactly. They use their interpretation of law to restrict others, stall legal challenges, and they use their economic weight within international bodies to try and shape the narratives and agendas there, too.
So the big picture for China seems to be this patient, multi-pronged strategy, aiming for dominance by stealth almost, making their leadership feel inevitable.
That sums it up pretty well. Where Russia might disrupt, China seems more focused on gradually reordering the system from within, conditioning everyone to accept its rising power as natural, maybe even beneficial.
Okay, fascinating contrast. Now let's turn to the United States. Our sources definitely position the U.S. as a longtime player in hybrid warfare, even if it's not always framed that way. What does America's hybrid toolkit look like?
Yeah, it's insightful because the U.S. has been doing things we'd now call hybrid warfare for ages. Think psychological operations in Vietnam or various regime change efforts in Latin America during the Cold War.
So what are their strengths now?
Primarily, it's dominance in global information systems, a very robust financial infrastructure, ongoing military innovation, and vast intelligence networks. And interestingly, unlike maybe Russia or China, the U.S. often institutionalizes its influence.
What do you mean?
Through established agencies, the CIA, NSA, USAID, the National Endowment for Democracy, NED, they each have roles mixing overt and covert means to advance U.S. interests. And the Pentagon's own doctrine, multi-domain operations, explicitly integrates cyber, space, info, economic tools with traditional military power.
And the U.S. advantage in the digital world is huge, right? Controlling the infrastructure.
Absolutely massive. Most of the global cloud, key software, the fundamental internet protocols, they're largely American-based or controlled. This gives the U.S. incredible capabilities for both surveillance and offensive cyber ops.
Stuxnet comes to mind.
Stuxnet is a famous example, yeah. That sophisticated cyber weapon, likely a U.S.-Israeli project, that physically damaged Iranian nuclear centrifuges, shows the potential. And U.S. Cyber Command is a major force for offense and defense in that domain.
And economically, sanctions are a big tool for the U.S., aren't they?
Huge. The U.S. uses sanctions not just to punish, but as a major lever of economic pressure. They can target individuals, companies, even cripple financial systems like we've seen with Iran and Russia.
How do they have that power?
Control over the U.S. dollar as the global reserve currency, influence over the SWIFT banking communication system, dominance in global banking generally, that gives them immense leverage. Even export bans, like restricting semiconductor tech to China, are economic warfare tools.
And then there's soft power, which the source is also linked to hybrid warfare. Hollywood, Google.
That's right. American culture movies, Netflix, Apple, Google has enormous global reach. It shapes cultures, values, opinions, often subtly. And U.S.-based social media platforms like Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, they become battlegrounds for narrative control, often amplifying American viewpoints, even if not directly state-controlled.
The U.S. also funds counter-hybrid efforts.
Yeah, supporting things like pro-democracy groups, press freedom initiatives, cyber resilience programs in other countries, trying to bolster defenses against others' hybrid tactics.
But the sources also mention criticisms, vulnerabilities for the U.S. too, disinformation, surveillance concerns.
Yes, it acknowledges that the U.S.'s own extensive surveillance programs and past information ops have drawn criticism. Some argue it undermines democratic norms, breeds distrust.
And the U.S. isn't immune.
Definitely not. The alleged Russian meddling in 2016 showed vulnerabilities, what the sources call weak cognitive security. Domestic political polarization, fake news spreading easily, algorithms amplifying extremism. These are internal weaknesses external actors can exploit.
But summing up the U.S., it sounds like a very comprehensive hybrid power, global reach.
Absolutely. The U.S. has this unique ability to weave together diplomacy, economic clout, cyber power, cultural influence into a global strategy. And its alliances, NATO, Five Eyes intelligence sharing Indo-Pacific partners, amplify that reach enormously. While others might focus regionally, the U.S. really operates on a planetary scale in the hybrid domain.
So the challenge for the U.S. is?
As the sources suggest, it's maintaining that edge in a world that's becoming more fragmented, more multipolar, where the very systems the U.S. helped build are now being used strategically against it by competitors.
Wow. Okay, this has been an incredibly rich deep dive. A lot to take in about hybrid warfare.
It's complex stuff.
Quickly recap. It's clear this isn't some future threat we need to worry about down the line. It is the current reality of global competition.
It is. It's how things are done now.
And it demands a really different way of thinking about power, about conflict in the 21st century.
Exactly. We've seen how the major powers are using these incredibly sophisticated methods, digital, economic, cognitive manipulation across so many domains to push their strategic goals.
And the key thing for everyone listening, I think, is that in our interconnected world, you're kind of caught up in this. You're both a potential target, maybe, and definitely an observer of these ongoing hybrid conflicts, whether you realize it fully or not.
Which leads us to a pretty big final thought, maybe something for people to chew on.
Oh, what?
Given how blurred the lines are now between peace and conflict, and how everyday things like social media or economic ties are being weaponized, what does genuine security even mean today?
Good question.
Do we need to rethink national security, our own individual resilience, especially when attacks might be invisible, hard to attribute, maybe not even recognized as attacks right away?
Yeah. What does being secure mean in this era? That's definitely something profound to consider.
You're tuning into the deep dive. You want to get past the headlines, right? Understand the big shifts without drowning in data.
And we're here to help you do just that.
Today, we're tackling something huge. The changing face of conflict itself. This idea of hybrid warfare.
Yeah, it's really moved beyond just, traditional armies clashing on a battlefield. It's much more integrated now.
Integrated how?
We'll think of it like using a whole toolbox military force, yes, but also cyber attacks, economic pressure, information campaigns, diplomatic moves, all coordinated to hit strategic goals, often without any formal declaration of war.
Exactly. So it's less about open battles and more about these subtler, multifaceted campaigns, almost hidden sometimes.
And the material you pulled together for this deep dive really shines a light on this. We've got perspectives on Israel, India, and then a look at, well, what's coming next.
Right. Our mission here is to unpack the core ideas, give you a clear picture of what hybrid warfare looks like today and where it might be heading.
So let's get into it.
Okay, first up, Israel. What really jumps out is how their hybrid approach feels so deeply ingrained, almost second nature, because of their, well, unique situation.
It's absolutely baked into their security thinking. What's key is this blend. It's not just military power. It's that power combined seamlessly, really, with high-tech tools, very sophisticated psyops, and world-class intelligence. That's the core of it.
And that intelligence piece seems massive. You've got Mossad, Amman, Shin Bet. They seem central to stopping threats before they even fully form, often operating in the shadows.
Yeah, and that allows for what's called plausible deniability, right? Actions happen, objectives are met, but it's difficult to definitively point the finger back at the state. Assassinations, sabotage, these are cited as examples.
It's a kind of power projection that avoids triggering, a massive conventional response.
Exactly.
Right.
For a nation in their geopolitical position, that ambiguity itself is a strategic asset.
Then there's the cyber dimension. Israel's reputation there is, well, formidable. Stuxnet is the obvious go-to example, isn't it?
The worm targeting Iran's nuclear centrifuges. Yeah. It showed how code could cause physical damage. And their signals intelligence unit, Unit 8200, is reportedly very active against groups like Hezbollah, Hamas, often without leaving clear tracks.
It really underscores how battlefields aren't just physical anymore, they're digital too.
And often targeted with real precision. It's not always about mass disruption. Sometimes it's about hitting a very specific capability or system. Makes you wonder, can a cyber strike be as potent as a bomb in some cases?
And they layer psychological warfare on top of that too. Disinformation, strategic leaks to shape opinion, even feints like hinting at invasions to create panic like we saw mentioned in escalations with Hamas.
It's about messing with the adversary's decision-making, their morale.
That pager bombing against Hezbollah in 2024 you mentioned, that felt like a prime example.
Absolutely. Embedding explosives in communication devices, it hit them militarily, sure.
Yeah.
But the psychological impact, sowing that deep mistrust within their own network, that's pure hybrid tactic, targets morale just as much as personnel.
Chillingly effective, as you said. And it doesn't stop there. The sources mention lawfare, using legal systems strategically, plus leveraging tech partnerships and arms exports for influence. It's comprehensive.
So if you pull all this together, Israel's doctrine looks like this dynamic fusion. Intel, tech, psyops, precise military action, all aimed at preempting threats, controlling the tempo, avoiding those long, drawn-out wars if possible. And they're clearly looking ahead. AI, drones, quantum encryption, they're adapting constantly.
Okay, let's shift gears to India. The sources suggest their move towards hybrid warfare is also, well, a reaction to a pretty tough neighborhood, dealing with asymmetric threats.
Very much so. Similar to Israel in a way, they're integrating kinetic and non-kinetic tools. A big catalyst seems to have been the 26/11 Mumbai attacks. That really pushed modernizing their intelligence raw. IB, the Defense Intelligence Agency, focus on better surveillance, wider reach.
It shows how a single major event can really reshape a nation's entire security posture, doesn't it?
Definitely. And you see that reflected in their counter-proxy warfare strategy, particularly near Pakistan. They talk about shifting from just defense to offensive defense.
Which brings us to things like the 2016 surgical strikes and the 2019 Balakot airstrike. Those weren't just military operations, were they?
Not at all. They were designed as much for the psychological message, for shaping the narrative, as for the physical impact. A demonstration of resolve, a deterrent. The info ops component was huge.
And India is building up its own cyber and info war capabilities too, right? Under new agencies like the Defense Cyber Agency, Defense Space Agency.
Yeah, protecting critical infrastructure, developing offensive tools, using AI for surveillance. It's about securing those digital and space frontiers.
Mm.
And they're also focused on narrative warfare, countering what they see as hostile information campaigns, digital diplomacy, regulating foreign funding sometimes.
Controlling the information space is clearly key for them.
And don't forget the economic angle, that digital firewall against some Chinese apps, the push for self-reliance with Atmanirbhar Bharat. These are economic policies, sure, but they have clear strategic goals too. Reducing dependency, building resilience.
It's about national strength in a broader sense.
And diplomatically, they're leveraging partnerships, the Quad, I2U2, to build collective defenses against these kinds of hybrid threats. It shows you need allies in this game.
So the picture for India is one of an evolving, increasingly integrated approach, using military, cyber, info, economic, diplomatic tools, all working together to protect their interests in a really complex region.
Okay, so we've seen how two major players are adapting. Now let's look ahead. Next generation hybrid techniques. What are we talking about, say, 2025 and beyond?
This is where it starts to feel a bit sci-fi, almost. The sources point towards methods becoming much more intrusive, maybe invisible, and targeting cognition itself, powered by AI, neurotech, quantum computing, autonomous systems.
Yeah, the potential impact is staggering. Think about AI-driven propaganda first. We're not just talking basic bots. Imagine large language models crafting incredibly persuasive fake news, deepfakes, impersonating leaders perfectly.
We're already seeing glimpses, right? AI avatars on TikTok, pushing state narratives, those advanced Russian bot farms.
Exactly. It's going to make telling fact from fiction online incredibly difficult, a massive challenge for, well, everyone.
And then autonomous drone swarms. Not just single drones, but coordinated packs.
Right, for surveillance, jamming, assassinations even, sabotage. And the line gets blurry when similar tech is looked at for law enforcement. Where does security end and something else begin? Think Turkey's Bayraktar drones or Israel's loitering munitions, but scaled up and AI-driven.
Quantum computing, too, that feels like a game changer waiting to happen.
Potentially, yes. If it reaches maturity, its power to break current encryption is immense. It could upend digital security as we know it. China's Mishi satellite, working on quantum communication, shows the ambition there. Suddenly, secrets might not be secret anymore.
Okay, but the neuro-warfare aspect. That sounds particularly disturbing. Brain-computer interfaces, memory manipulation.
It does sound far-fetched, but the sources mention active research. DARPA projects in the U.S. China's reported interest in neurostimulation. The idea is influencing thought or emotion directly. Maybe for troop enhancement, maybe crowd control. The ethical lines here are, well, profoundly troubling.
The very idea of individual autonomy is challenged there.
Deeply. And alongside that is weaponized data. All the digital breadcrumbs we leave, they're being hoovered up to build incredibly detailed psychological profiles.
Which can then be used to manipulate us.
Precisely. Nudging consumer behavior, swaying voters, influencing health choices. The Chinese social credit system is often cited as an extreme example, where state surveillance merges directly with behavior modification. Your online life, your real life. It all feeds the system.
So the future battlefield isn't a place anymore. It's woven into everyday life. Threats could come from anywhere, facial recognition, a software update.
That's the picture painted. A battlefield that's invisible, persistent, and total. Integrated across cyber, cognitive, biological, physical domains, conflict becomes this continuous, often deniable hum in the background.
Invisible through things like subtle cyber strikes, AI narratives subtly shifting opinions, economic sabotage like a hidden virus in a power grid. Things you don't see until it's too late.
Exactly. And persistent means it's not just wartime, peacetime anymore. It's constant competition. Even everyday interactions, online platforms, they can become arenas for strategic influence.
And the total part, that's about how everyone and everything gets drawn in.
Right. Civilian infrastructure, power grids, finance, transport becomes a primary target. Private companies are on the front line. Citizens aren't just bystanders. Their data, their perceptions, their actions are part of the landscape. Think about smart cities. All that interconnected tech is also a massive vulnerability.
And then the big powers are all adapting their strategies for this.
We see China's civil-military fusion, the U.S. building up cyber reserves, Russia's well-documented blended operations. Even smaller states are getting in on the act, exporting hybrid tools and know-how.
It really feels like the goal shifts from capturing land to capturing reality, controlling perception data choices.
That seems to be the direction. Data is the new oil. Perception is the new territory.
So, okay, if this is the reality hybrid warfare as the dominant mode of conflict, driven by tech, data, ideology, asymmetry, How do we even start to prepare for this total hybrid war? What does it mean for us listening right now?
That is the crucial question. The sources make it clear. This isn't theoretical. Major powers are integrating these tools. Economic leverage, digital ops, psychological campaigns, legal maneuvers.
Yeah.
It's happening.
So national security can't just be military and spies anymore.
Absolutely not. It demands this whole-of-society approach.
Yeah.
Government, tech sector, finance, education, media, civil society. Everyone has a role.
And things like cyber defense and fighting disinformation. That becomes everyone's job, too, in a way. Not just tech fixes, but critical thinking, digital literacy.
Exactly. We all need to be more discerning consumers of information, understand the potential for manipulation. For you, the listener, it means questioning sources, being aware of how narratives are shaped.
Democracies seem particularly vulnerable here with our open systems.
They do face challenges, yes. Openness can be exploited. Authoritarian states might find it easier to impose control, track citizens, disseminate propaganda domestically. But democracies have a core strength: legitimacy derived from the people. If that trust and cohesion can be maintained, it's a powerful defense.
So what are the keys then? Asymmetric thinking, maybe. Anticipating the unexpected.
That's part of it. Also, rapid adaptation, constant learning, building societal resilience, controlling our own narrative effectively, and countering the lies. And maybe above all, fostering national unity and trust. Hybrid warfare often seeks to divide and polarize. Cohesion is the antidote.
Because, as the sources suggest, in this kind of conflict, everyone is a participant, knowingly or not.
Precisely. Understanding these dynamics isn't just academic anymore. It's the first essential step for all of us in navigating this really complex new world.
Wow. Okay, so this deep dive has really charted the course of hybrid warfare from Israel and India's current strategies right through to these, frankly, quite unnerving future techniques.
Yeah, we've touched on some powerful examples. Stuxnet's impact, the pager bombing's psychological blow, the potential of AI fakes, weaponized data. It's a lot to take in.
It really leaves you thinking, doesn't it? This invisible, persistent, total conflict. What does it really mean for things like our personal privacy, for national sovereignty, even for just, social trust? Makes you look at your phone a bit differently.
And this conversation is just scratching the surface, really. It's a field that's evolving incredibly fast. We hope this gives you a framework, encourages you to keep digging, keep questioning the information you see.
Absolutely. And we'll keep doing our part here at the Deep Dive, unpacking these critical topics. So until next time.
Stay curious, stay informed, and stay aware.